What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel, and now welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed unless, of course, your taste level is lacking, baby, because here is where it's at. Okay, y'all, I am so excited about today's video. I don't watch much TV, but when I do, it's always like thriller or like something super suspenseful. Anytime I'm watching something, it's kind of weird, okay? And I feel like y'all already know that, and a lot of y'all are my people. We watch the same shows. I started watching this show called The Changeling on Apple TV with Lakeith Stanfield, and after watching all 5 episodes, I ain't gonna hold you, I felt like the show had good potential. I felt like the show was good, but it was something I was missing. Like, it was something I was not getting, okay? I was out of the loop of the joke. And then I realized the name of the show is Changeling. I don't even know what a changeling is, okay? Because that is not something that is very popular over here in America. So I fall down the rabbit hole of finding out what a changeling is. And as I'm reading about it, because, you know, the thing is, over here in America, in our folklore, fairies are mostly a good thing, typically. But they were speaking about fairies on the show like it was a bad thing. I was so lost, fell down the rabbit hole of finding out what a changeling is according to like European folklore. Y'all know I am a fan of urban legends. I do some of those over here on the channel, and so I'm excited for today's video because we're gonna get into what a changeling is, the urban legend, the true cases that have been changeling related. And yeah, definitely recommend if you want to watch that show. It won't be any spoilers. If I feel the need to do a spoiler, I will put it at the very end of the video and give you a warning before we get to that, because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody if they don't want it to be spoiled, right? That being said, if you want to watch that show, I highly recommend you watching this video first, because if you are like me and you went to watch it without knowing what a changeling was and like the history of fairies over in European folklore, you will be completely lost. The show is impossible to fully enjoy without knowledge of what's going on. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, if you're over here in America, typically when you hear the word fairy, you think of like Tinkerbell, something cute, dainty, a friend of a human, right? But that is certainly not the case when discussing Irish mythology, and especially in relation to a changeling. It's quite the opposite, actually. A changeling is a fairy who has been left in place of a human child or a human baby that has been stolen by some other fairies. Now, the changeling is said to have characteristics that make it appear to be the same child that it was swapped for, but it will exhibit just enough unusual, troublesome, taunting behavior, just enough to let you know that this is not your child. Now, the urban legend, as told by the brothers Grimm, is that there was a young mother who had given birth to her child and had to return to work a week later, and she didn't have, I guess, a baby father or a babysitter. So she had to take this child to work with her, and she worked harvesting, like in a field. So she takes the baby to work with her, this 1-week-old baby, and she finds a safe space that she can hide the kid on a small patch of grass, like away from the hustle and bustle of harvesting. Yeah, if there is any. Now, several hours later, when she returns to nurse the child, she picks it up, gets ready to, you know, position it to latch, and this baby howls in a very inhuman fashion. It then latches down on her breast and like feeds off of her like an animal, and this baby was nothing like the baby that she had left on the grass. Okay. However, she returns home with the kid and she keeps it for several more days, attempting to be a mother to this baby, tolerating its foul behavior until the child just becomes intolerable. So she goes to a wise man for help, telling the wise man that she does not believe that this entity is her baby. Like, this is not a child, okay? This definitely is not the same kid that I had. And this man tells her that if she does not believe that this is her child, that there is only one thing for her to do: take the baby back where she had left her original child to go work and beat this little fake baby with the switch, and she'll witness a miracle happen. I don't know, that sounds like a setup to me. But nevertheless, she goes out and does as she's instructed, beating this little baby as it screams. Then this fairy that has stolen her original child appears before her and says, "There you have it." Then it gives her her stolen child and takes its own child away. Now, the reason for these fairies taking human children varies by region. Some say that that they take the child to act as a servant or as a pet, a little companion, and the fairy will continue to raise it as such. They'll task the human with performing household chores, cooking for them, and entertaining them. Now, in some areas, they say that a child is taken for ransom, that the fairy needs a little bit of money, or at least for the family to promise to continue to care for them or provide for them going forward with whatever assistance that they need. In some cases, it is believed that they take human children because they admire the vanity and beauty of a human and they just keep them as a trophy. And I feel like grabbing a human baby, honey, if you want something that's beautiful, you're taking a risk grabbing an infant. You don't know which way that baby is going to go. Some believe that they take the child as a prank on the family and they have no real use for it after the fact other than cause the parents of the child distress, and that sometimes they'll eventually just swap them back. And the most common belief is that we don't know what happens to the human child once it is taken by the fairies. As for the changeling that is left behind, physically it will look exactly like whatever child it was swapped for. But because it is not of our world and it is not human, it'll eventually start displaying really weird, troublesome behavior. It'll become ill or have developmental issues as it becomes older. And of course, they're not leaving behind one of their good fairies, okay? It'll be like a little baby fairy that nobody cares about, or it'll be a really elderly fairy that's close to end of life. And sometimes the changeling will manage to disappear eventually, somehow making its way back to the fairy world. And this whole changeling thing is said to be the reason behind so many cases of missing children and young adults. According to the myth, this is also the reason why children become fatally ill or have developmental issues, because they have been swapped by fairies. Now, way back in medieval times, children with deformities, illnesses, or conditions that at the time could not be explained were thought to seriously have been swapped out for a changeling, which is why many of them were like abandoned or killed off. And this belief is also said to have helped families cope with the harsh realities of infant mortality and childhood diseases. For some parents who had lost their child, it was easier for them to believe that this wasn't really their child and that their child had really been swapped and was being cared for somewhere else. It was a very common practice for new parents to practice certain safety measures that would guard against fairies and changelings. It was believed that iron repelled fairies, so they would put iron near their baby's bed. They would perform rituals like fire scaring because that was said to be one way to cast out a changeling, expose it to fire. Baptizing your child early was also said to be a way to keep them from being swapped out for a changeling, because then they couldn't be. Now, as science progresses over the years and scientific explanations replace a lot of these superstitions, beliefs in changelings begin to kind of die back, and childhood illnesses were given names and not said to be because the original child was swapped out. But of course, cases continue to emerge where family members are still convinced that their kid is a changeling. And because most stories claim that a changeling had to be tortured into revealing itself, it unfortunately led to a lot of cases of child neglect and abuse. The Bridget Cleary case is one of the most popular and well-documented cases, and it occurred over in Ireland. Now, Bridget was a woman, not a child, whose husband and several other family members and neighbors became convinced that she was a changeling and not a human. 26-year-old Bridget had gone missing in March of 1895 after she had been sick for several days and had been diagnosed with bronchitis. About a week into Bridget's illness, she is in grave condition, and her father, as well as her husband, began making claims that she had been swapped for an ill fairy and needed to be swapped back. In an effort to force the fairy to reveal itself, they subject Bridget to extreme measures. They throw urine on her, and a ritual is performed where they carry her and hold her in front of a fire, demanding that the fairy reveal itself and that it be cast from her body. But nothing happens, and she is just there suffering from bronchitis. Days after this ritual is performed on Bridget, rumors begin to circulate around the neighborhood that she had disappeared, and it is also noticed that the family is really no longer speaking about her. So someone calls the police and drops the dime, okay? When the police come looking into her whereabouts, her husband opens the door holding a vigil and tells them that his wife was not there because she had been taken by fairies. On March 22nd, her severely burned corpse is found in a shallow grave, and 9 family members are arrested and are charged in her disappearance and or death. And it is revealed that on the morning of her death, her husband had reached out to a pastor, Father Ryan, and had asked him to come around to the house. Now he does so, and when he got there, according to him, Bridget was alive but agitated. Michael had told him that he had not been giving his wife the prescribed medicine for her to get better because he had no faith in it, as this was not a human. It was actually a fairy. Human medicine don't work on fairies like that, according to Michael. At that point, Father Ryan gives Bridget communion. He prays over her and he gets out of there. And later that night is when the ritual was held. And apparently everyone was gathered around and they just had her in front of the fire, not actually in the fire. But Michael then took it too far and began to douse kerosene on the woman from an oil lamp, causing her to catch fire, and he held everyone back from her body as she burned, insisting that this was a changeling and now he would get his wife back from the fairies. But afterward, nothing really happened. Everyone went home and he buried her. During the actual trial, the jury is taken to see Bridget's body and see for themselves the extent of her injuries. And at the conclusion, her husband is found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years of hard labor. He is released after serving 15. And then he moved to Canada and lived out the rest of his days up there. Now the other 9, they received lesser sentences and punishments, most of which was a couple of years of hard labor. And there was also the Anne Jeffries case in England where a young girl was believed to be a changeling after she had some developmental issues that supposedly affected her speech and her behavior. Now, in the case of Anne, her family actually went to court before a judge to be heard about their belief that their child was a changeling. They basically show up there like, listen, this here, it looks like our kid, but it's not. It's been swapped for something else. We need the courts to do something. Now, the judge heard them out and was very skeptical, of course, of this changeling claim, but for the well-being of the child, does have the child removed from the parents and placed into another home with a couple that did not believe in this whole changeling thing, and they just took care of little Anne from that day forward. There was also the case of a young boy by the name of Michael Leahy, who was also suspected of being a changeling by his parents after displaying some developmental issues. Now, his parents, as well as their neighbors, believed that he had been swapped out by fairies, and together they, as a group, much like Bridget's family, performed rituals on the child in an effort to drive out the changeling and force it to reveal itself. Now, sadly, Michael does not survive the rituals that they subject him to. It was actually his grandmother that had fatally harmed the boy, and she was taken to court, put on trial, admitted that she had done these things because she wanted to drive out the fairy. And even after her admission, she was found not guilty. Now, granted, changelings aren't really a thing over here in America like that. We too have had a few cases here. There was the Bridget Bowling case in Vermont, where a young child was born with a disability that rendered them unable to speak or walk. Bridget's family was accused of not properly caring for, cleaning the child, neglecting her, not feeding her. And when confronted, they basically were like, oh no, it's cool. Like, that's not really a kid. It's not a child. It's a changeling. You don't need all of that. And they really believe that this child was not theirs. Their Bridget was somewhere else. Ultimately, the child was removed from the home and another family was found to take care of her. In Sweden, a couple was placed on trial after making their 10-year-old sleep outside in the winter on top of a pile of manure on Christmas Eve. Now, this child was very ill and had been very sick for a while. The child was also not growing properly, and so the parents come to believe that this is not their kid, that it's a changeling, and when they went to court, they claimed that they hoped by leaving the child outside in such a way that the fairies who had stolen their kid would come swap it back. Instead, the poor child that they leave outside does not make it through the night. Now, there have been those who were of the belief that their child had been swapped with a changeling, who still felt as though they had to properly care for and look after their changeling child. And they do so because they fear that if they didn't properly care for the changeling, that over in the fairy realm, they'll be peaching on their real baby. They also did so out of the fear that they would never bring the child back. Now, there's also this theory that this whole changeling myth actually stems from family survival way back in the day. And that if one of the members of the family was born with a disability or for whatever reason would be seen more as a liability or dead weight, instead of allowing the child to continue to grow up and drain them for their resources without being able to contribute, they would rather let the child die or be killed off. It was also seen as something shameful to have a child that needed a little bit of extra TLC. And so instead of the family owning that reality, they would feel more comfortable telling people that their kid was swapped for a fairy. Infanticide is what it really is, which honestly is on brand for fairy tales. A lot of them have horrible, dark, twisted plots, but child, they put that little melody on it that we don't even realize. Most of them are very dark when you think about it, child. Like, why are you singing to a kid about a cradle falling down from a treetop, baby and all? Why am I supposed to be soothed by that? Like, how am I supposed to sleep well knowing that the baby didn't fail? Okay. Now, I know, I just feel in my spirit that some of y'all have watched The Changeling and would like for me to get into the show. So if you have not watched The Changeling and you don't want any spoilers, this is where I'm going to say bye to you. Okay. But if you want to hear my thoughts on the first 5 episodes, here we go. I think it's very interesting now that I know what a changeling is. So we know that Sister Girl's first wish was for the baby. She had the baby. Her second wish was for the husband. She got the husband. Her third was for a fairy tale ending. But little does little mama know, or probably because the ribbon was cut instead of her allowing it to fall off her wrist, she got this twisted version of a fairy tale, which is Changeling. Now she got this little baby Brian that is not a human, and she just looks like a crazy person because, child, well, maybe she is a crazy person. I don't know. I feel like she's been low-key giving crazy since episode 1. That's just my opinion, though. But I also think that Lakeith Stanfield is a changeling because if y'all remember, his mother used to leave him at home because she had to go work, just like the brothers Grimm story of the woman who had to leave the baby in the hay because mama needed to work. And his mother had to return to work and she was leaving him home to watch TV. I feel like just like that baby got swapped off the little patch of grass, Lakeith Stanfield's character got swapped as a child. I think this man was a changeling. And that might be why his little baby Brian ended up being a changeling and why her whole fairy tale ending ended up being this contorted, weird, strange version of what she wanted it to be. But those are just my little, my little 2 cents, my little guesses. We still got 3 episodes to go, but I'm pretty sure that Lakeith is a changeling himself. If y'all are watching The Changeling, let me know. Let me know your thoughts. I feel like if you watched it without knowing the history, then I don't think you would like it. I feel like it doesn't make sense, really, if you don't know what's going on. I actually found this whole changeling thing to be very fascinating. If you know any more good, fascinating urban legends, please let me know down below and I will certainly look into them. Let me know if you're familiar with this whole changeling thing and what you think about it. I think it's absolutely absurd that they were whacking these children, but I can't say I'm surprised. Okay. Before you leave, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you have not. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me and Bella, who is chewing right here by my leg. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace. Really, Bella? I feel like I say really, Bella, more than I say anything. Let me squirting iced coffee everywhere. My goodness. Well, 7 hours, not 7, several. Jeez. Could have been 7. Take safeguards against to make it and baptizing was also another way of really, Bella, girl is gone. She want to scoot the bowl all across the kitchen floor. then they couldn't be. But of course, as now you want to burp, girl. I mean, now the other chart there. Before you leave, please like the video. Give me a thumbs up, but that's the same as liking the video.